I did it. I did it on this side. Do you see it's recording?
Okay, yeah, it says that it's recording. Okay, welcome everyone. This is the No More Tears webinar launch, an integrative and holistic discussion on domestic violence for collaboration, facilitation, education, leadership, awareness, healing, and expansion. Um, I wanted to get started. I just want to mention that we are going to be recording this session for everyone's benefit and to raise awareness in different communities. You will have access to this session later. There is a chat box at the end where you can ask questions if multiple people are talking, but please try to avoid the chat box when we're involved in insightful discussions during the session. Um, so, this is Somi Ali, the president and CEO of No More Tears. We wanted to welcome everyone for taking the time, your leadership roles and services and contributions, and joining us today, especially on a weekend, to collaborate with No More Tears Public Health webinar. We sincerely apologize as we recently discovered that this weekend, Somi, her father, had a heart attack, and she will not be able to contribute to the team-based facilitation as we had originally planned. However, No More Tears project is very important to her, and she's deeply grateful for your presence and your contributions here today in her absence. So I'm going to be introducing our lead facilitator, Dr. Carole Lieberman. We're very honored to have her. She's an internationally renowned media psychiatrist, best-selling author, who's duly certified as a psychiatrist and has earned her public health education from UCLA. And she's contributed to teaching endeavors at UCLA Neuropsychiatry Institute. Dr. Lieberman has also been a 3-time honorary by the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences and the Academy of Television Arts and Sciences Daytime Emmy Awards. She's a talk show host of Dr. Carol's Couch. Dr. Lieberman analyzes the psychological impact of the world events as a guest and host on all major media outlets and in her keynote speaking engagements. Viewers from all over will recognize her from frequent appearances on Oprah, Larry King Live, The Today Show, Good Morning America, Entertainment Tonight, CNN, Fox News, the BBC, and many more. She's been profiled and quoted in newspapers, magazines worldwide, from New York Times to London Times, from USA Today to Hollywood Reporter, Newsweek to Cosmopolitan. Dr. Carroll's also a best-selling author of numerous books, audio, video, and DVD relaxation programs. She maintains her star-studded practice in Beverly Hills and is well known as a psychiatrist, expert witness who testifies in high-profile trials, and she analyzes trials in the media. Some examples include People versus Michael Jackson, the complaints of Child Protective Services, celebrity cases as Roseanne Barr, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Jim Carrey, among numerous others. And she's worked with many cases dealing with the Congress, as well as President Clinton's impeachment trial. Psychiatrists, psychologists, other mental health professionals hold Dr. Lieberman in the highest esteem, recognizing her as the quintessential, multidimensional, famous psychiatrist who deserves to be called Dr. Freud of our modern times. So we want to welcome her. We're very honored to have her facilitate the session. And finally, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Denisha Shah. I'm aspiring to advance in multidimensional study of integrative and healthcare and holistic medicine, global healing, through a triple degree pursuance as a doctorate in osteopathic medicine, master's in public health, and a doctorate in conflict analysis and resolution. I will be leading this session as well with Dr. Lieberman, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Yes, thank you all. Thank you, Denisha, and thank you all for being here. You see on the first slide the purpose of why we're all here. And you can read that on your own. It's obviously, well, just to paraphrase, we're trying to raise awareness Uniquely, we're going to be talking particularly about holistic and integrative methods of trying to prevent and treat and focus on domestic violence. And then also we're going to be trying to perhaps, hopefully, that this is the beginning of another avenue or a new avenue to increase interprofessional collaboration, because as you'll hear when we each introduce ourselves, we come from various perspectives, and that it will be incredibly important for more of these kinds of collaborations, because domestic violence is not something that can be, and obviously hasn't been, taken care of, prevented, treated, helped by any one profession over another. So please make sure that you're muted until we get to hear you speak. Now I'm going to go down the list of people who are in the webinar right now, and I would like you to, as I was mentioning earlier, if you could give your name, where you're located, and what your particular perspective is, what, you know, either the strongest contribution that you've made to the field of domestic violence, but also just to give us more of a human insight, what impassioned you to focus so much of your life on domestic violence? You know, why you're here today, why did you specialize in this? Why are you doing so much work in this area? And obviously, we are drawn to certain things based upon things that happen in our own life. Either being a victim, knowing a perpetrator, you know, having had some kind of experience in your training or whatever it is, you know, that brought you here and that made you feel so passionate about this. So I'm going to go down the list. You can see when you're going to be coming up. I'm going to go down the list of the people who are attending, and if you could try to keep your comments to 30 to 45 seconds, just as an introduction. Of course, you'll all have much more time to talk, to answer the questions that we have, discussion questions. So why don't we start with Anna Nogales?
Sure. I'm Dr. Ana Nogales. I'm a psychologist. I practice here in Southern California. I have offices in Los Angeles and Orange County. And I have founded Casa de la Familia, is a nonprofit organization, and we have over 40 therapists working in the issues of domestic violence and other traumas. I think this is an issue of human rights, as Hillary Clinton said 20 years ago, and I applaud her for her speech at that time. Not much has happened since then, but some things have happened, and the whole thing about domestic violence needs to be reviewed. We need to collaborate, as we are doing right now, and with every single different approaches will help to change this community and this problem that we have within all of the societies. And that's more.
And no, and what brought you into this field to begin with?
Human rights. I'm very interested in human rights. I've never been a victim of domestic violence, but human rights is my point. I can explain more if you want later, because it's a long history why I'm going in human rights. But because of that, because of my experience in media, I also wrote books. I also wrote a play. I wrote some songs. So I think that media is one of the numbers to change the issues of domestic.
Should I be on the telephone?
Okay. I don't know who that is in the background.
I think it's Dr. Rana Fields calling in through the phone.
Yes.
Dr. Rana, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can hear you fine. I was waiting for you to call on me to.
Okay, so welcome, and we're going to be calling on you in a few minutes. Okay. Well, actually, since you're not, let's see, are you on the list? No, so why don't we do it now? Did you hear what I was saying at the beginning? I would like you to say your name, where you're located, what an important contribution is that to the field of domestic violence, and most importantly, what your personal background is in brief as to why this has become your passion.
Okay. So do you want me to introduce that now?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. My name is Dr. Rona Fields. I'm a psychologist, sociologist, anthropologist, and I became involved in the issue of violence as such back in the 60s and was one of the first people to move from calling it KZ syndrome, which was the name made up for concentration camp inmates who had trauma, multiple trauma, and to ultimately name it post-traumatic stress disorder. That was at the Stonehouse Conference here in Washington and back in 1970 something.
Okay, we need to kind of move it along so that each person's
Okay,
not
so
more than 5 minutes. But what was your
domestic violence is part of the general scene of people who have been traumatized, and that was one of the ways that I got into it. Back in the 60s. In the 60s, I was involved primarily with the Chicano community and the Vietnam veterans community.
All right, Dr. Rona, we need to move on to the next person. Thank you. It's just that if we all spend a whole lot of time, we're not going to have time to talk about the issues. But I do want to hear more of your personal reasons for this. Brandy Carlson, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Brandy Carlson. I work for the Florida Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I'm in Tallahassee, Florida. And I don't have a particular contribution to, other than the work that we do all over the state. We do a lot of systems work and work with a number of partners such as law enforcement and child welfare, all types of work, and we see really big changes all over the state on a regular basis. So it's just really exciting work. And, I have certainly my own experiences from childhood with violence, and it's just something that I've always known that I wanted to do with my life. So that's it for me.
That's great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes. Now, Christina Chandler.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
I'm Christina Chandler. I'm from New Hampshire. I work for the Monadnock Center of Violence Prevention. I'm solely committed to supporting the survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault and stalking. By breaking the cycle of violence, we do prevention, education programs, lots of advocacy work, and our philosophy is based on an empowerment model. We do forensic interviews, we work with law enforcement, and lots of community outreach and awareness programs.
Okay.
I got into it years ago in South Carolina because I was military and saw a lot, and that's kind of where my passion grew.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now, Jack.
Hi, I'm Jack Patrici. I'm located in Massachusetts. My work is now, I guess the main contribution now is working with large systems like and different state attorney generals' offices or coalitions on their response to both domestic and sexual violence, and using spiritual and creative responses to the trauma and to prevention. My personal path into doing this work grew both from being a child witness of domestic violence, an adult survivor of domestic violence, sexual violence, and stalking, and coming to a place of wellness and wanting to share that. And also having done a fellowship overseas in over 30 countries and seeing that overwhelmingly women and children being trafficked and abused just sharpened my inspiration.
Oh. All right, thank you. Who is next? Christy Adache.
I'm Dr. Christy Adachi. I live in Honolulu, Hawaii, and currently I spend a lot of my time.
Can you speak a little louder, please?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, but just try to make it a little louder.
Okay, I'm speaking right in front of my microphone. Can you
Okay, all right.
That better?
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm Dr. Christy Adachi, and I spend a lot of my time volunteering for the Hawaii State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Currently, I'm working on a program, our first annual domestic violence awareness benefit program called Take a Stand, which was held on October 17th. Basically, I'm recruiting people to sponsor and donate to the program. The reason why I got into our violence is because I am a survivor of domestic violence. I was one of the busiest surgeons in Honolulu, Hawaii. I am a specialty surgeon in head and neck cancer surgery, and I finished my residency program at Stanford. And currently, I am completely disabled as a surgeon because of the violence inflicted upon me. So
Wow.
I was recruited by Marcy Lopes, who is the director of the Hawaii State Coalition, and she's up next, and she knows my story very well. So I am not allowed to speak in Hawaii, so this is awesome because nobody can hear me in Hawaii. And yeah, my story.
That sounds like it's a story in itself. Nobody can hear you in Hawaii. Okay, we'll go to Marcy Lopez, and perhaps you can put that into perspective as well as introducing yourself.
Sure, I'm Marcy Lopes. Not Lopez, it's Lopes, Portuguese. I'm the executive director for the Hawaii State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. My background is I am a clinician, and I also became a certified substance abuse counselor because I was seeing so many women into our shelter with substance abuse issues because of their trauma. Now, since I'm at the coalition, I have the ability to tackle so many of our systems that are broken here in Hawaii. And Dr. Adachi is my biggest supporter and ally. And she's unable to share her story right now because her court cases are pending. And so we don't want to jeopardize those cases. But once everything's settled, she is a strong and mighty woman who will be using her voice.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Meena Patel.
Hi, my name is Meena Patel. I work for an organisation that works with black and minority women, and it's called South of Black Sisters. We're based in London, UK. And I'm part of a team, so I have to talk as an organisation rather than as an individual, because the kind of gains and changes in the law that we've made for minority women has been quite a few, and it's been as a teamwork. But my passion to be part of this group, as well as to be working in the field of domestic violence, has been partly because of some of the major changes that we're seeing in the UK that's affecting black and minority women. And so that's been my passion, particularly around immigration and how that has an impact on violence against women. But in a capsule, that's quickly what we're about, and we've made massive changes in the UK for women, which I can talk about a bit later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You know, I just want to, you know, what you're doing is obviously going to be ever more important in terms of the wave of immigration that is hitting the UK, as well as, of course, the rest of Europe. But also, I want to make sure that I mention, for any of you who did not see the film Provoked, which Meena can talk about, I'm sure, but it is a must-see. There are so many, you know, so many aspects of what we are going to talk about, what I'm sure you all see all the time, but like in such a moving manner that that movie is just, it should be a must-see in community centers and in certainly for mental health professionals, for people in law, all over the diverse professionals, that we were talking about, that it really shows many of the injustices that go into domestic violence. Syed, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right. Syed Jalani?
Yes. Hi, everybody. This is Syed Gilani. I'm here in Pueblo, Colorado. I'm a family medicine resident getting training as a family medicine doctor. I'm actually originally from Pakistan. I was a physician there. Came here in the United States in 2001 just because of I have a very rare kind of bone tumor, and I was treated as a bone. It was treated as a bone cancer, and I was under treatment at University of California, San Francisco for 5 years in and out. So when I finally get in remission, so I didn't know that I was having a lot of problems in behavior-wise. In 2007, I was officially diagnosed, actually 2008, officially diagnosed as a PTSD. And I did not know that. Even I was a physician and I knew the signs, but I did not detect it in me. So my passion is, and I'm here because I'm personally affected by PTSD, and I worked in underserved area where people are affected by all this problem, all these mental illnesses, and I wanted to work in that area. I'm a part of the Pueblo Violence Committee. As you know, that there's a legalization of marijuana in Colorado, which is affecting more and more people regarding PTSD, regarding violence. And I worked, part of my patient population is soldiers, and I work with them for PTSD. And there's a program we are starting in our program, which is a residency program, which is called Adverse Childhood Experience, and I'm pretty active in that too.
Okay. I guess should we take from what you just said that your PTSD is related to your having witnessed or experienced domestic violence?
It's basically, yes, and it's part of the immigration process too, and then dealing with the severe sickness.
All right, well, thank you. Okay, Denisha, so why don't we...
Dr. Carole?
Yes, Dr. Carole, we have skipped Aurea.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Huh. How did I do that? Oh, I know how okay, well, it doesn't matter. I blew it. Okay, Aurea, would you like to...
Sure. No problem. Can you hear me okay? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Hi, can you hear me? Good, okay. Hi, I'm Aurea McGarry, and I am in Atlanta, Georgia, and I am a domestic violence thriver. And that's why I'm so passionate about helping people, whether it's escaping domestic violence safely, because I was stalked, which was very severe, and I want to also help prevent domestic violence with education to young girls especially is my passion. And I'm very proud that I'm the founder of the Live Your Legacy Summit that helps honor people doing great things in the nonprofit area. And I'm the author of the book, I Won't Survive, I'll Thrive, which is about overcoming and having a wonderful, thriving life after domestic violence. And of course, I've had cancer too, which is another story. But I'm also a speaker and MC. And what I like to do most is I love that I'm now a charity auctioneer. So I actually go in and help charities like domestic violence organizations raise money to help support girls and women that need to escape. I'm also trying to help the organizations that are trying to stop sex trafficking as well. So I'm just a big advocate because I'm a thriver myself.
Awesome.
Great. Okay. Denisha, are we ready to go to...
Yes, we'll just have to move on. Whoever signs in from this point forward,
Yes.
yeah, we're just going to have to start with our presentation. So,
And Don't wait you don't have to wait to be called on, well, when I open it up, just whoever would like to address the particular topic. There are 10 topics. I'm not sure we're going to get through all of them, but you know, you don't have to wait to be called upon once Denisha and I have made our little comments. Okay, go ahead, Denisha.
Okay, so my first topic is going to be on history and evolution of many of the conflicting domestic violence perceptions. And I really want to try to engage everyone in a discussion where we can start with where everyone is with their understanding of the history and then kind of aim toward a standardized universal definition or of domestic violence. So domestic violence has an ancient history beginning from biblical days where women have compromised their personal liberation for societal security by allowing themselves to be purchased in order to become the legal property of one male partner in order to protect themselves from assaults of many men in their environment. Let us journey back to the history and the evolution of domestic violence and evaluate its origin from the lens of sociology, archaeology, religion, psychology, and to current emerging perspectives. There are multiple roles of public health professionals, holistic healers, integrative health coaches from various domestic violence agencies who are involved in identifying, preventing, and treating domestic violence as present here today. No More Tears, Growing a New Heart, Nogel Psychological Counseling, Southall Black Sisters from London and UK, After the Trauma Institute, Faith and Trust Institute, and many other organizations here. However, I feel that there's a deep lack of common, universal, standardized core educational process that all of these experts and agencies can agree upon due to the increasingly confounding factors and perspectives on the origin, the history, the background for domestic violence from the standpoint of public health professionals who seem to lack a mutually standardized cooperative process.
Can I get into the conversation here?
Yes, Dr. Lieberman, did you want to go ahead and ask?
No, this is Dr. Fields.
Okay, let's now that we have the slide in front of us, when you unmute yourself and you want to make a comment, please say your name first so we know who's talking.
Yes, this is Dr. Fields, and I do want to make a comment because I've written a book called Against Violence Against Women, which takes into account the history, the anthropology, and it's pre-biblical that this kind of violence was sanctioned, and that it happened. And the issue goes back to some of the tribal times, which were times when there was necessity to protect women in tribal wars because the woman's body is the receptacle holding the family honor. That was why it was done. So the idea of protecting women became an idea of possession of women. And once women, and you can see this as it goes through the book, it was also in a previous book I wrote called The Future of Women. That came out in 1985. This is, this happens because women are not able to own anything themselves in most of these societies. They could only own through being owned, and then they didn't own. Now, that's still the case in Africa. It's still the case in many of the Middle Eastern countries and in Afghanistan, and I think in parts of India as well. So the woman's body doesn't belong to her. It is simply a receptacle for the man's honor. Therefore, one of the things that is said is that if a man insults your horse, you kill him. If a man insults your wife, you kill her.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Dr. Fields. I want to make sure that we kind of have, I'd like to give everybody well, I mean, everyone isn't going to answer each question, but I mean, I'd like to have more people be able to comment on these topics or these questions. Is anyone else? You know, we're trying to, looking at the history, that also leads to the idea of making this universal educational system by understanding where these problems came from, looking at every country and understanding where all the domestic violence problems came from to begin with. Is any, oh, Christy, yes, how do you like that? You really, it works. You can see people raising their hand. Okay, Christy.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. So the conference that we're having on October 17th, our keynote speaker is actually going to be Reverend Miles. He is a chaplain at the Queens Medical Center, where I practiced for 18 years. And his topic is going to be about spiritual aspects of domestic violence. Exactly what you were speaking about is using biblical phrases, but his whole purpose is how people use spiritual Bible and taking those phrases of the Bible out of context. And that's not what the Bible is intended to do. God loves women. God is not against women, and the Bible was not to be against women. And so that's what people who are agnostic choose to focus on and are using in the defense to say that Christians are against women. And so that's part of
We will be getting more onto a deeper level of this topic. Thank you for bringing that up in one of our other questions. So,
would anyone else like to make a quick comment about this first question?
I would just say, this is Dr. Ana Nogales, that I'm 64 and I was born and raised in Argentina. And I still remember, because it had so much an impact on me, that when I went to school in high school, this teacher was saying, women are to be receptive. Even our bodies have that shape. Our genitals have that shape. So we have to be receptive, implying exactly the same thing that you were just saying, you know, that in ancient times, well, I experienced it within my lifespan.
Yes, that's it's interesting how men can use that, you know, use our bodies against us literally like that.
It was a female teacher, by the way.
A what teacher?
It was a female teacher.
A female teacher. Oh, well, okay. All right, why don't we go on to the second topic, Denisha?
Okay, so the second topic we're going to be focusing on prevention. So there's the independent current model of public health prevention, and I want to try to kind of get everybody to not see, you know, different pieces of puzzle for prevention, but try to see it more in a comprehensive manner. So, according to the latest CDC reports, the injuries and violence are the leading cause of death from birth up to 40 years of age, and public health professionals have become increasingly aware that domestic violence is a leading conflict affecting the overall well-being and health of millions of younger populations worldwide. As a result, domestic violence has been identified as a top public health priority. The public health approach to prevention strategies is usually classified into primary prevention, which is before the problem starts, secondary prevention, that's once the problem has begun, is when you start the treatment, and tertiary prevention is once the problem is diagnosed and treatment has begun, but you want to further prevent it from a long-term hazardous consequences and recurrence of the incidents of domestic violence. So that's the traditional approach to public health prevention strategy, primary, secondary, tertiary. And that's really has been the standard. But a more comprehensive approach needs to be analyzed in combating all three forms of targeting these prevention strategies into a more holistic and integrative strategy. Obviously, there are many obstacles and challenges for collaborative approaches to domestic violence prevention techniques from this traditional public health prevention model, which really limits our prevention potential. So, Dr. Lieberman?
Yes. Denisha had asked me to give you an example here of a case, an emotionally disturbing case of trauma or rape from one of my experiences. Actually, I have been involved in domestic violence, or seen domestic violence in a number of different ways. One is as in my role as an expert witness, and one is, of course, as a clinical psychiatrist, and then there are various other ways. But one case, I guess, when I am asked what's the most disturbing case, it was of a woman who came to my office in Los Angeles, and she was in her 30s, and she was sent to me by an attorney who, because she was in the midst of a divorce. And it turned out that as we sort of, I was doing therapy with her, not just being her expert witness for the divorce, but it turned out as we peeled away the layers of the onion, that her story was that she was married, first of all, to a man who was a studio executive in one of the major movie studios in Los Angeles. And so, talk about prevention. One of the reasons why she hadn't been, no one would listen to her, is because, here she was married to this man who was a big shot movie executive, and they assumed that whatever he said about the story was right. But in fact, it turned out that she had been raped by him in a very unique way. He would give her each night, or well, maybe not one night after the other, but over a long period of time, he would give her a date rape drug. This is his wife, the mother of his 2 children. And he would rohypnol. He would put that in her drink or in her food. He would somehow get it into her. And during the night, he would have his friends come over and rape her anally. And so when she would wake up in the morning, she would have these strange effects of the rohypnol. She'd be a little dizzy. Of course, part of rohypnol is it makes you forget what happened the night before. Why it went on for so long, so many times. And finally, she was bleeding from her rectum, and she had different physical problems, from this. And she went to the emergency room, and they finally figured out that she had been given rohypnol. And, so she had a 4-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old son. And as she was talking about them and different things that she was seeing in them, it turned out I was able to diagnose that the little girl had been sexually abused and the little boy had been physically abused by this same man, her husband. And so, of course, I called the Department of Child Services, and they went out. And again, in terms of prevention, here she was, this woman, she had a career of her own, but compared to this man who was a big shot in town, nobody would, no one wanted to go against him. They wanted to believe him. And so they didn't take the children away. And about a year later, it turned out that in school, in the little girl's school, with something, when she was playing with something, it turned out that she had signs of sexual abuse that couldn't be ignored anymore, and he was finally prosecuted for that. She was taken away. So part of this prevention problem is getting women to believe, especially in certain circumstances when their husband is going to be more believable than they are. So why don't I open it up now? Who would like to either comment on that or talk about other aspects of prevention?
I'd like to say something about it. This is Rona Fields again, because I've also been an expert witness in many, many cases of violence in several different countries and internationally. One of the things that I am trying to do through that book, the subtitle is the case for gender as a class against violence against women. The reason being that so much violence in so many places is aimed at gender issues, and that means that gays, bisexuals, and transgender people become targets en masse for gender violence. And this plays into the issue of domestic violence, because very often what we see is, as the case mentioned, it's not only violence against women, which is bad enough, but little boys as well.
Yes.
And boys are trafficked, just not quite as many as girls are trafficked, but it depends on the part of the world in which the trafficking happens.
Yes.
Because in many places, boys are the preferred sex object.
Yes, absolutely, Dr. Mills. We don't really, I'm sure, yes, we all realize that.
What I'm trying to do is to get not just a statement opposing violence against women, but including gender as a class in the genocide conventions, so that wherever gender violence is sanctioned, it becomes illegal and prosecutorial.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
I'd really like to get other people to also be able to have time to comment.
This is Dr. Ana Nogales. In terms of prevention, I think the role of media is very important. If we are talking about prevention here, right? Media is very important. I think that we learn a lot more from media than from schools, than from parents, than from friends. Media is in our children's mind 4 hours a day. Children and adolescents spend a lot of time. Whatever they see on media is what is the reality for them. So we should have a massive campaign against violence against women, and to learn how to respect women, mothers, sisters, friends, women in general. I think that we are failing as a society in terms of prevention because media is in more than one way perpetrating the idea of domestic violence as something that is okay when someone is upset.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the ultimate example of that is all the video games that include violence towards women. Jack, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, yes, I want to talk about expanding the concept of prevention. One of the roads I take into this in judicial education in the United States is expanding the concept of a reasonable person. As you know, in law, the term that used to be reasonable man, now reasonable person, is the relevant community's judgment as to how a typical person would behave. And those understandings of how a typical person would behave is actually how a typical man who's privileged would behave. And part of what I try to do is expand people's understanding of how a typical survivor behaves given constraints. And that helps people, judges, juries, social workers, make decisions, the public, neighbors, in support rather than of judgment against survivors.
Yes, absolutely. And that makes me think of the movie Provoke. That's part of what gets across in that.
Nina wanted to talk about it. Maybe she can get into Provoke too from London.
Yes, absolutely. Mina? Mina? Are you there? Mina, would you like to say something about this?
Have you raised?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can, yes.
Okay. Basically, what I wanted to say was that one of the problems that we're seeing in the UK is that, yes, we can talk about prevention through lots of different streams from community-based groups and religious bodies, as well as through education programs, and we do a lot of work with young children in schools looking at healthy relationships and what that means. But at the same time, we're at loggerheads in terms of the way in which the state is funding specialist services such as ours, and how we work with black and minority women in this country. And we're seeing a lot of organizations up and down the country who've lost their funding as a result of state cutbacks, the austerity measures. And there is a lack of services. So although we can talk about prevention in the wider context, but if the services aren't there for women to approach, then there is a massive problem. And in terms of Kiranjit Ahluwalia, the Provoked film, although that's not completely accurate, the thing with that was that when we started to campaign, we didn't realize how big it would become. And we found that the media at that point, when we started the campaign, weren't really interested in black and minority women's issues. And in fact, the constant feedback that we got in the 70s and early 80s was that it's a family matter and you can resolve it within your own communities. So women were being denied the assistance or the help by the state in escaping violence and abuse, and we've tackled that over the years and made changes. But we always seem to make one step forward and 10 steps backwards at the moment with all the different changes that are going on. But with Kiranjit's case, it took a long time for us to gather the evidence. And in court originally, the courts failed to recognize how domestic violence could be, the whole issue around accumulation of the violence over the years could become a snapping point for women, and women don't normally go out to kill as such, particularly if they've been through violence and abuse, and they failed to recognize all of that, which we then brought into the courts when we had the retrial for Kiranjit, that we said a lot of women aren't able to, particularly black and minority women, in the name of honor, are not able to report domestic violence. Because if they did, there's a lot of other hurdles that they have to overcome. One is the community, the ostracization and the isolation by the community, plus also the whole fact of the state not believing. And we're constantly seeing this whole judgment about how women are telling lies in order to get housing or to get some money. And I feel that I've been working at South Black Sisters for 27 years. And basically, I feel in this time and moment, I've gone back in time and having to refight for rights for women in this country in terms of housing and benefits. And the way that women are being treated at the moment is in such humane and degrading treatment of women, particularly when they're trying to get assistance, that one has to wonder about where humanity's gone now. Because that's what makes me really passionate, because I just feel that I'm fighting against all the austerity measures that have gone on here, and now this whole issue around immigration and the impact of immigrants being in this country, and they're just here to have our money and they're here to have our jobs. So we're going back to this whole racism element as well that's emerging, particularly from Muslim women.
Actually, that goes right into our question number 3, and Aurea and Christina, maybe I see your hands are. Maybe you can connect what you're going to say to question 3 as well. So go ahead.
Can I go ahead and give the introduction of question 3, Dr. Lieberman?
Absolutely.
Okay. So No More Tears have had numerous racial, cultural, and ethnic conflicts dealing with domestic violence, beginning with the famous traditional ideology of patrilineal system in Somi's popular documentary film I Can Survive, covering the plight of a Pakistani gang-raped victim, Karan Mai, which was aired in one of Hillary Clinton's benefits in 2005, leading to modern gender issues, gay rights issues, human rights, women's rights, especially of ethnic and multicultural women facing the conflict of domestic violence, which has been highly prevalent in arranged marriages, a perpetual predisposition similar to many emerging experiences of London and UK from the Southall sisters present here today and other parts of the world. I'm not sure if you wanted to talk about any examples, Dr. Lieberman.
Yes, I'll be happy to give you an example. This was also from an experience as an expert witness. This took place in Central California, where in a city where it was right in the midst of the American Indian population, and there was a man who was charged with domestic violence. He was in jail, And this kind of shows the other side of this so that we could, I'm sure we've all come across this part of it too. He was in jail. He was accused by his girlfriend, his then girlfriend, of domestic violence. And, you know, there is, of course, talk about racism and immigration and, well, and with American Indians, it isn't immigration, but there was, you know, in the justice system, there was prejudice against American Indians in that area or in general. And so they believed her. This is kind of an opposite example to what I was talking about before. The police came, she called the police, 911, and they came and they believed her, you know, that her story of his having committed domestic violence on her, and he went to jail. And I was called in to be the defense psychiatrist on his behalf, and it was looking very glum because they were all believing her. And it turned out, I had to do a lot of research into this, it turned out that he had in fact committed domestic violence on a previous girlfriend of his. Some years before. He was in his early 30s, and it was some years before. And this current girlfriend, that incident had been in the newspapers, and this was a relatively small town, and people knew about it. And this current girl, who alleged domestic violence, had in fact read the stories and known about the stories of...
Wait in the living room, I'm at webinar.
Yeah, come here, thanks. Yeah, thank you very much.
Having committed domestic violence on his previous girlfriend. And so it turned out that she made up this story. And she made up this story because she suspected that he was cheating on her. And she wanted to punish him. And obviously she had serious problems herself. And in fact, in the end, he was acquitted. But sometimes these stories go so deep, it can go, in other words, the other way too. Yes, there are women who have their own problems and who will use this. Obviously, this is the minority. You know, most women do not report domestic violence if it isn't true because of the shame and all the other things that go with it. But this was an example where the ethnic issues came into play and where he wasn't really getting heard properly because of his ethnicity. So go ahead, Dr. Shah.
Okay, even as our world is headed towards globalization today, the cases of domestic violence associated with cultural, ethnic, and gender discrimination continually persist, as in these popular cross-cultural themes discussed by Dr. Lieberman and some of the other cases that we've studied in our literature. There are many differences between people from different countries who experience domestic violence, as the story of the Indian-British woman Kiranjit in the film Provoked, the African-American woman in the movie Color Purple, the Islamic woman in Mukhtar and Mai in Somi's short film, and many distinctive cross-cultural stories from leading domestic violence institutes around the world, including even Latina stories from Dr. Anna's counseling. However, there's a common origin of socio-psychological inequality between male and female that they have this traditionalist, patriarchal values which prevail as that's the basic foundation to the root of this public health problem. And No More Tears have targeted many victims of these vulnerable groups, ranging from not just domestic violence, but malnourished groups, immigrants, victims of trafficking, sexual and gender issues, among others. And we've tried to develop a sort of a vision that tolerates this high level of diversity among victims of various countries and cultures and ethnicities, gender differences, while also trying to better understand and move forward toward a common resolve with this highly convoluted and complex conflict of domestic violence. So Dr. Lieberman.
Yes, okay. Why don't I know Christina has...
Okay, I have to sign off now. I've got a patient. This is Rona Fields, okay?
Okay, thank you for joining us. Christina, would you like to comment?
Yes, I kind of just want to go back and touch base a little bit with the prevention. I find it here in the United States, everywhere that I've worked, it's the same group of family. They are stuck in a cycle, and it's not only do we need to educate the youth, but we also have to start educating the parents to break the cycle so that this doesn't continue to happen. There's a trend here, and it's the same victims, same family members, because we're not getting in and we're not educating and giving them tools to get out of the abusive relationships. And I feel like that's something that's not fully addressed within our communities, and a lot of people don't understand that. So I wanted to throw that out there.
And were you seeing that it was a particular ethnic groups or just in general?
It's lower income. Ethnic group varied. Just people in lower income housing or low. I mean.
Okay. Yes. Now let's see. Christy, what would you like to add? Oh, your hand was up. Okay. Why don't we go on to the next question?
Dr. Anno has.
Who?
I just found a little hand where to raise my hand. Well, this is especially problematic for Latinos and other immigrants because there are so many issues that prevent women from reporting, such as the lack of education, lack of English skills, lack of information. They don't know where to go, isolation, being separated from their families. They have no one to go to. The poor self-esteem, the internalized low self-esteem because of the trauma effects of domestic violence, the fears of police and fears of immigration because they think that they're going to be deported or they're being incarcerated. Even their husbands would say something like, if you report it, you know, you will go to jail. All of those issues have a significant impact in immigrant women, in Latina women too. When you were talking about the lack of education, yes, of course, a lot of new immigrants have 2 jobs, parents are working all the time, and children are not being raised by their parents. They are just there by themselves, and they don't have the skills to deal with conflict. When there's conflict at home, then it's perpetrated, as you all know, so I don't have to lecture on that. But also religion is a huge, huge issue. I went to Guatemala, and I went to a church in Guatemala.
Dr. Anna, let's. I just want to pause you. I'm sorry. We have a big religious question, and I want to hold your. Okay. I know you're really excited about it, but I want you to.
Yes. Why don't I see that we have Dr. Michael Levitan, who joined us after we had made the introduction. So why don't we let him introduce himself? Michael? Michael? Dr. Levitan? Now you're okay to talk. You've been muting yourself, but now it's okay. Can you try to speak? Let's see. Well, Michael, if you can unmute yourself, if you can figure out a way to unmute yourself, then just join in wherever we are so I can introduce you.
How's that? Can you hear me?
There we go. Okay, yes. So at the beginning we were saying our name and where we're located, what one of our accomplishments are in domestic violence, and particularly why we became interested, why this is passionate for us.
Okay. I'm located in Los Angeles. Can everyone hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I'm located in Los Angeles. One of the things I do, I'm in private practice. I started my practice working with victims of domestic violence, and then I started working with perpetrators. This goes back 22 years or so, and I'm director of a certified batterers treatment program in California. So I work with victims and perpetrators. I do groups. I work with individuals. I do lots of teaching on this. At UCLA Extension, I teach mostly other therapists, social workers, psychologists, etc., on the dynamics and treatment issues with domestic violence. And I also have worked as an expert witness, victims and perpetrators of domestic violence. Thank you.
Okay, all right, and feel free to raise your hand on this little box here so we know when you'd like to answer something. We're going to go on to question number 4.
Okay. All right. So the U.S. government statistics and research has.
What happened?
Are at risk of exposure to domestic violence every year, and up to 15% of children have witnessed marital rape in cases of domestic violence. There are many forms of witnessing domestic violence by children, as in seeing the actual incidents of physical and or sexual abuse from their parents, hearing threats and demonstrations of horrific noises, observing the consequences of abuse as blood, broken bones, injuries, shockingly dreadful beatings, and becoming aware of tension and fearfulness in their homes. And the No More Tears have observed major impact of domestic violence on our children, the future leaders of our tomorrow. The impact is explored across multiple interrelated domains as domestic violence exposure and child abuse, impact on parental capacity, and exposure to additional adversities with potential concerns to children's needs, which are required for evaluation on a consistent basis. Young children living with domestic violence are at increased risk of experiencing emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, of developing trauma and other adversities in their lives. Children are significantly affected by living and being exposed to marital hostility, and the consequences continue on throughout their lives, suffering from high risk of alcohol, drug abuse, post-traumatic stress disorder, juvenile delinquency, depression, anxiety, behavior problems, aggression, rejection from peers, and failure in school. And witnessing domestic violence is the most important predictor of juvenile delinquency and adult criminality, and the #1 reason why children run away from their homes. This impact is long-lasting and can endure even after measures have been taken to secure their safety. So our question to the group is, focusing on child-centered approaches. Does anybody want to discuss any personal experiences or stories that they've had that have been, memorable, dealing with domestic violence extending to, child, the effects of a child witnessing the incident or reporting it in the family? Nina?
Your hand
Yeah.
up for that? Okay, go ahead.
I just want to say that one of the I have to go back to immigration because that's one of the areas in which a lot of children are being denied any assistance and help by the state, particularly when they're witnessed or have been subjected to violence. The state social services here, under Section 17 of the law, they're entitled to get access to housing and assistance, and we're finding that a lot of the time that the women are being turned away and told to find their own mechanisms to sort things out, or they're being told that the children were put into care and the mother would not be assisted. And we had a case where a woman who had a knife against her throat while she was carrying her child. And when we managed to assist her very quickly, the police assisted in this matter, and we went to social services because she had an immigration issue. So the social worker, it takes us literally a whole day and a half sometimes to try and resolve problems with the state and its services. But in this particular case, they said that the woman could return back to the violent situation in the home with the child. And we had to argue that it was not safe for her to return because the perpetrator had a knife at her throat, and it's very dangerous. Not only dangerous for her, but also her child. But they wouldn't believe that fact, and they said that there were other tenants in the house who could protect her. And we're seeing a lot of this, and so women are being denied. And the other thing they offered her was a ticket back to her country, which just worries us completely in which the state doesn't actually or denies assisting children who need support and help, and particularly those with immigration issues. And what deters women from approaching, and I must say that the other previous person who spoke, who talked about all the other areas in which women are kind of entrapped, and passport and control over women who don't have the right to remain in the UK is often used to control and patrol women, and the state then allows secondary trauma towards women and children by denying them any kind of help in the UK. So we're seeing a lot of this, and we're seeing a lot of women who have an immigration issue who are either contemplated or attempted suicide as well. So it's problematic in the UK, and they're not entitled to any health services anymore. Under the new immigration bill, even they've made the public as their the big brother who keeps an eye on all the undocumented migrants or those who don't have the right to stay, and they've made us into spies who go and tell the Home Office when we know that somebody's not allowed to be in the UK. And the laws they brought out is that as landlords, you're not allowed to rent your accommodation to undocumented migrants or anyone. The health service now, if you're an undocumented migrant, you're not allowed to be in the UK. They expect you now to pay for the services. And if you are in the country legally as a student or in another visa, you are expected now to get an insurance to pay for your medical treatment. So that the impact on undocumented migrants or people who've come into the UK under different visas it's immense and huge, and I see it all the time. In fact, personally, I get approached by certain people and say, would you put me up for the night because I've got nowhere to live? And I've never ever had that, and this is the first time I'm beginning to see that people have nowhere to live anymore, and they're living in bins, dustbins that are kept outside people's houses, in garages and so forth. It's the way in which the government are trying to get rid of what they call the so-called benefit scroungers, and lately what they're now saying who's deserving and who isn't in terms of refugees. As you see in Europe, the amount of refugees who are dying in Britain failed to even address or even to take in some of those refugees, and still and my view is that taking 20,000 over 5 years is a ploy, because what they'll do is that they're hoping by next year or the year after that things will be resolved so that those 20,000 won't ever arrive into UK. But now it's becoming who deserves to be a refugee and who doesn't.
Yes,
And there's a lot of backlash now.
Of course, it's even worse on all of this is worse on the children, all of these.
Exactly, yes, because the children are denied any sort of help. They're denied any kind of housing, proper housing. And what they've created is racism to its highest extent. And in fact, one woman in our organization support group, she came and she said to me that this man jumped on the bus, and because he saw the women wearing the whole veil, and particularly Somali women in Southall wear them, he jumped on the bus and he said, "Run, everyone! There's a terrorist on board." So we're seeing more and more of racism.
Yes, I'd like to give some other people a chance to speak as well. I don't know if I know some of you have admitted having a personal, having a victim or having. I'm wondering if anyone would talk about having seen domestic violence as a child personally, if that has occurred to anyone who is on the panel. Perhaps not. Or perhaps if you have, as a clinician, if you have treated children who have witnessed domestic violence, perhaps you'd like to mention something about that. Anna?
Yes, I just want to tell you what a patient is 13. Doctor, how many times your husband hits you? That was amazing to me, to hear someone that have normalized violence in such a degree.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Just that tells you a lot.
Yes. Michael?
Yes, I can speak to, I think one of the questions you might have asked before when we were introducing ourselves is what led us into this kind of work, or what fuels our passion for this.
Right.
And of course, I think on different levels that as an intern, I started working with victims right away, and some of them had children, and that drove me to find out, this goes back over 20 years, drove me to find some mentors in the field, leaders in the women's shelter movement. But then I look at the deeper motivations what got me involved in this work, and I can think back as a 4 or 5 year old little boy with a father and a stepmother who were constantly at war, yelling, some physicality of pushing and shoving and throwing things at each other. And I remember as a 4 or 5-year-old trying to run in wherever they were arguing, in their bedroom, the kitchen, and trying to intervene, even as a little boy, and being, chased away back to my room, and the pain I went through when I'd be back in my room, suffering and listening to it and trying to cover my ears, and that had a definite lasting impact on me. And just one further note here, I'd like to think that my efforts now at bringing peace to warring couples are a lot more successful than they were when I was a 4-year-old boy.
Yes. That's
Dr. Carole, I just wanted to interrupt. I'm sorry. We have Dr. Richard Marling from Harvard. If he wants to give a quick 30-second introduction, and then a really interesting conversation. I want to hear more, but if Dr. Richard wants to, Dr. Richard, can you hear us? Welcome.
Yes. Hi, Dr. Richard. Would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what made you passionate about focusing on domestic violence? Can you hear me? Perhaps not yet. Dr. Richard, would you like to try to fix your computer so that you can hear us? Can you hear me now? Well, why don't I go to, Sid had been raising his hand. Are you still saying?
Yes, I actually was. This is. I don't know. Have you heard about adverse childhood experiences? So there's the. If you go to CDC website, you can see that how childhood experience. It's ACEs. We call it ACEs, and there are widespread studies and evidence-based studies which shows that there is a method which it's being we started that study in our program, and it's been already documented in other programs too, that we do ACEs score, which is a adverse childhood experience score, and the higher your scores is, the more you will have in childhood, the more you will have chances of chronic disease, and it's regardless to the socioeconomic status. It's basically this study predominantly was originally done in middle-aged families, and the effect of health adverse outcome is so ginormous that CDC has to put is on their website because it's impacting, and that's how the childhood trauma affects the not only the how a child behaves when it grows up older. And I'm listening a lot of conversation about women and stuff, but and I'm not disagreeing with that, but I'm saying that when you see the violence, that's how this is my personal experience. That by dealing with the patient, and I practiced 7 years in Pakistan as a physician, when you see the violence, that's how you act when you grow up, because you don't know anything better. And I know all the experts know about it, and I don't have to tell, but I'm preaching to the choir, but that's what I'm saying. And when I came to this country, and I'm seeing these kind of studies, so I'm amazed that it's becoming an evidence-based science. So I would like you to go ahead and sometimes, the way you are recommending Provoked movie, you will go in the CDC website and see these adverse childhood experiences studies, that how amazing and eye-opener it is. And actually, California Pacific Health CPSP in San Francisco, they have a center, Dr. Nadine Harris-Burke. She's working on it quite a bit, and it is spreading to these studies. They are doing these experiments and giving the grants to underserved areas, especially in my area, where it's a very underserved and has a lot of violence, and we are using that over here. So that's my 2 cents.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And you know, it's interesting that either people, the more common consequence of little boys seeing their parents arguing domestic violence in their home is to become perpetrators. So it is rare and, of course, important that people like Dr. Michael Levitan have reacted to it in a more positive way, in actually trying to turn it around and help people with that. And you too, Saeed. Okay, so shall we go on to question number 5, Denisha?
Yes, I know we have more people interested in this topic. Maybe in the future we'll have a more focused presentation because this is a very deep topic. It's impacted a lot of people, a lot of children and families. So perhaps we'll have a future presentation on this.
Sure.
Okay, the next one I want to talk about is substance abuse and domestic violence management. There's so many individualized therapies, and many studies have demonstrated that it's not just the batterer who's deeply influenced from the substance abuse, as alcohol, leading to dreadful acts of domestic violence, but also the victims themselves of domestic violence are often found to be substance abusers themselves. One of the studies I reviewed from National Institute of Justice in a research preview of Memphis study, it was of nighttime arrests. It showed that 72 victims studied, 42 domestic violence victims were using some form of drugs or alcohol on the day they were assaulted. And about 90% of the batterers were substance abusers themselves, especially from alcohol, which is #1 substance abuse related to domestic violence, and also cocaine. I know that the No More Tears we've had, and all these worldwide agencies present here today, they have healing modalities to help victims of domestic violence from the consequences of substance abuse. And there are different types of therapies for victims, including individual therapies, family therapies, couples therapies, group therapies. There are also, I just want everyone here to reflect on how one particular modality is usually not beneficial as compared to a more holistic approach in combining and mixing approaches in dealing with the whole person in mind, body, and the soul. In addition, there are various alternative and complementary strategies that are used in conjunction with the standard treatment approaches for healing, as hypnosis, biofeedback, deep breathing exercises, relaxation therapy, guided imagery, yoga for trauma victims, meditation techniques, reframing and cognitive reconstructing, aromatherapy, nutritional therapy, Reiki, reflexology, verbal therapy, massage therapy, acupuncture, for pain management. There's homeopathic, naturopathic remedies, osteopathic manipulative medicine, which is my specific background in medicine, Chinese medicine, faith-based healing, energy medicine, and prayer and meditation for healing. So, Dr. Carole, I wanted to open this question to the group.
Yes, okay. I mean, obviously, we all know that men, well, and I keep saying men because, of course, it is mostly men who are committing domestic violence, but I'm sure we all have had examples of cases where it has been women or it's been people of the same sex on each other, but, you know, for the purposes of just making it facilitating this, talking about men, we all know that whoever the perpetrator is has a hair-trigger temper and easily provoked, and of course when they're using some kind of substance, alcohol or cocaine, which even activates them more, whatever it is, that diminishes their inhibition all the more and makes them more likely to engage in an episode of domestic violence. So, who would like?
Can I speak up? Can you hear me?
Who is this?
It's Michael Levitan.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to say sort of a cautionary note here that though the studies indicate a high correlation with alcohol and substances and acts of domestic violence, I think it's very important when working when applying that clinically, when working in the treatment rooms with the victims and the perpetrators, that's not sort of used primarily as a justification or reason for the domestic violence. With victims, sometimes I hear it very often with perpetrators, that they deny their violent tendencies. They deny with perpetrators, if it is the man, their patriarchal way of thinking, and blame it on the substance. And I like to tell them that in that can of beer or a glass or bottle of whatever alcohol that they're using, that there's no violence in that. It just releases makes it less likely to inhibit. You know, it sort of loosens the connections between the thinking part, prefrontal cortex, and the limbic system. But so I'm saying the cautionary note is to be aware of the high correlation, but not allow that to be used. Because then, you know, clinically, then we're missing the deeper issues with both victims and perpetrators.
Right, it's not an excuse. Of course, we also need to mention that people who are involved in substance abuse, people who are substance abusers, come from a childhood where there has been a lack of love and attention, and they're filling this void, and often from homes where there is domestic violence. So it combines to make people become victims of domestic violence and become perpetrators. Who else would like to comment on this substance abuse aspect? Anna?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment also that
Anna, let me just stop you for a minute. Somebody has been clicking on something throughout this, and it's very distracting. So could you please either mute yourself if you're going to be clicking on something, or okay, Anna, go ahead.
I was going to say that in my experience, in my clinical experience, women or victims of domestic violence that are using alcohol, usually alcohol, is because they do it for self-medication purposes. But when the stats are taken, they are not usually asking the reasons of why they are using alcohol or other drugs. But it's very common for women to cope with, not very common, but in my experience is that a lot of women drink in order to be able to cope with what they have at home.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. Of course, we need to show them, provide for them better, healthier ways of coping.
So statistics doesn't show the difference. There's chemical abuse or substance abuse, but what's the reason? That I think that's important to take into account.
Yes. Christy, what would you like to say? Christy, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself so we can hear you? Great. Christy?
I had my hand up for the previous question, that's all, so go ahead. I don't.
You don't want to say anything about this, okay. Yes, we need to make sure that we don't keep our hands up for anyone.
I took it off, sorry.
Okay, that's okay. All right. Well, why don't we go on to the next question then? Question 6, Denisha. Go ahead, Denisha. Dr. Shah.
I don't think she's with us at the moment.
Yes, okay. All right. Well, question 6, well, you can all see what that is. Denisha, I'm sure, will be back with us in a minute. I hope. Okay. She had asked me to give you an example, a clinical example of this, this being the...
I'm sorry, Dr. Lieberman, I'm sorry I muted myself.
Okay.
Do you want to give an example? Or I could talk about the background.
Well, okay, well, why don't you talk about the background first, and then I'll give an example.
From the time a victim enters our No More Tears organization, which focuses on multiple levels of healing, we've taken a large step in collaborating with various experts to accomplish their mission. We deal with team of dentists, doctors, lawyers, divorce attorneys, psychologists, therapists, counselors, a holistic team of experts who play a significant role in the transformational process of a victim. And due to this type of a broader vision, broader focus, the No More Tears has made it very easy to be reached by many clients and have developed more of a global appeal in treating the victim's transformational process. However, there are interrelated, codependent issues to consider when victims come from different countries. There's language barriers, there's social conflicts, religious conflicts, environmental conflicts that these victims face as part of their struggle and transformation, and it may affect the quality of the services throughout the process. For some victims, the violence is extended toward the children, pets, elderly, other family members, neighbors, as an extended part of their lifestyle, and into the local communities. This is going to impact everyone everywhere around them, locally, nationally, and globally. So I wanted to have Dr. Carole possibly give an example, or if you know, if the experts want to try to reflect on this topic.
I'll give an example, and then if everyone could just check, your hand is up so that I know that you want to answer this question or whether it's left over before. The example that I'm going to give actually relates to how it extends to the community, but also it also speaks to the substance abuse, and it speaks to children, what we were talking about before. And this was also a case that I dealt with as an expert witness, also in Central California, where a woman a battered wife was in jail, as was her husband, the batterer, but not for the battering. It was because a child was brought to an emergency room by a relative, and this child had been left. This child's mother was a different woman, and she was a drug abuser, and she was off with a bunch of different men all the time, and this child wasn't really being taken care of. And so she asked another family, a husband and wife, to take care of her child. And of course it was supposed to be just briefly, but it wound up being indefinite, until the child became battered, and to the point where another relative took the child to an emergency room. And actually the wife, the one who was in jail that I was talking about, and her one of her sons, the older sons, took the child to an emergency room. He was on death's door. And they eventually figured out that it was this woman, the wife, who I'm calling the wife, and her husband, who had battered the child. And it turned out that this woman did in fact batter the child. It wasn't her child, batter the child. And part of it was because she had been battered for many, many years by her husband. They both were abusing drugs. And she was, not that this is any excuse, but she was battering the child as a way, because her husband was telling her to, and as a way to avoid him battering her. I mean, it was just a very tragic situation, tragic family situation. And so, of course, in the end, you know, by my bringing to light how much she had been battered, at least that diminished her sentence somewhat. Not that I did, and not that I am giving that as an excuse for what she did to this child. You know, it was sort of a community problem that this child was the result. The child's battering and almost dying was a result of a number of problems that brought him to that situation. So it's just an example of how, you know, battering isn't just a situation between two people. It does spread out into the community, and has to be fixed at all these different levels. Now, who would like to comment on this aspect? Christy Adachi, would you like to comment on this?
I can comment, even though I didn't have my hand up, but
oh, okay.
I'll comment on it. When I was growing up, my father used to beat my sister, my brother, my mother, and in order to avoid being beaten, I was a good girl. I stayed quiet, I did what I was told, and I just avoided it. My brother used to try to call Child Protective Services, and as a consequence, he would get hit more. My father would rip the phone out of the wall, and back in those days, that's back in the 60s, nothing happened. My brother had a bad temper, but to my knowledge, he never beat his kids, never beat his wife, and basically stuffed all his anger inside. Now, my brother is a victim of domestic violence. His wife has beaten him. I see pictures of him being all bruised up. And because he does not want to be like our father, he has taken it. He's flew from California. Now he's living with me in Hawaii. So we grew up in a household of domestic violence. I grew up as the good girl, not doing anything, not saying anything, and I became a victim of domestic violence. And my brother, because he did not want to become like our father, he's become a victim of domestic violence. So when I'm allowed to talk, we, as brother and sister team, we have a big story to tell in Light in Hawaii.
Yes, well, I thank you for sharing all of that, and I'm sorry that all of that happened to you. And yes, it does teach things on a number of different levels. Michael?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yes, I belong to various organizations dealing with domestic violence, child abuse, interpersonal family violence, etc. And I've recently proposed a global peace committee, which was accepted by this think tank that I'm a member of. And this global peace committee, the focus is, and we're just getting off the ground, the focus is on how violence in the home, these are our first role models, the people we internalize the most, domestic violence only recently being recognized as a form of child abuse. So I'm saying children who are learning this in the home as a way of reacting and dealing with conflict go out into the world as adults and not only are more likely to engage in abusive and violent relationships, but cause more violence and abuse in terms of conflict, war, torture, terrorism, etc. So the reaches, the consequences of domestic violence are in subsequent families, adult relationships, but also in terms of the state of affairs our world is in. And I think that that's a very important piece that needs to be addressed. And people in this forum here who are experts on family violence, the whole purpose of my Global Peace Committee is that we can have a voice, a unique voice, in understanding conflicts globally.
Yes, absolutely. That is at the root. I mean, it does start with each individual. I mean, it's kind of like be the change. Everything starts with you. It's the same thing with violence, that can have a negative impact. Anna?
Yes, I think that education should include education in schools about how to resolve conflicts, how to improve communications, and as I said, media, it should be involved too. And because we cannot always count with the families, as I said before, a lot of families have 2 jobs to be able to survive nowadays, and they come home very tired and they don't have the time to be involved with the kids. So we all as a community are responsible for our kids. I mean, our kids, not just my kids, but my neighborhood kids, my community kids, and this should be something that really government should be involved, because it takes more just than mom and dad.
Yes. Why don't we go on to question 7? Denisha. Go ahead, Denisha.
I've been talking and I muted myself. I apologize. I wanted to touch base on faith-based violence. The No More Tears has encountered many multi-faith victims from numerous religious traditions and faith-based communities, including Muslims, Christians, Hindus, Native Americans, Jews, Catholics. The list goes on. When considering religion and domestic violence, it's very important to note that an individual's faith and support from their communities can be a vital component in helping with the healing process, as the additional spiritual guidance and support can add the emotional, physical, and financial obstacles already faced by the victims. In the past, Somi Ali, the founder of No More Tears, has opened Somi Designs, as what she calls the clothes to promote awareness. There were clothes where she inscribed with symbols and messages promoting religious tolerance, world peace, and human rights. And one of her favorite T-shirts that she promotes is symbols of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and Hinduism intersecting. And this extraordinary religious diversity raises many concerns in having common, basic understanding and cooperation of domestic violence when dealing with religious issues. And so I wanted to have everyone reflect on various religious scriptures of the world. When you take more of a meticulous evaluation, there's a dimension of equality and mutuality between men and women that's often overlooked due to persistent individual and collective biases. For example, the Christian perspective offers the most important verse in the Ephesians passage on husband and wives to be mutually subject to one another. Quote, be subject to one another out of reverence, Ephesians 5.21. The Jewish faith also shares a mutual responsibility, marital obligation of peace within families, and the ultimate choice for couples as, quote, love your neighbor as yourself, explains the Talmud. The Quran offers the same human equal rights from the first verse. Quote, O mankind, reverence your guardian Lord who created you from a single soul, created of like nature its mate, and from them both scattered like seeds, countless men and women. Fear God through whom you demand your mutual rights, and reverence the wombs that bore you, for God ever watches over you. Quran 4.1. And finally, the ancient Vedic scripture Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God, also focuses on equal vision between man and woman. Quote, the humble sage by virtue of true knowledge sees with equal vision. That's in Bhagavad Gita 5.18. Despite the presence of these crystal clear religious and scriptural confirmations, majority of the world's population chooses to focus on discrimination, prejudice, inequality, and they use, in a subtle way, use scriptural confirmations to promote their, their issues. So, Dr. Lieberman, you wanna?
Yes. So, if everybody could sort of take away your hand, unless you really want to speak to this question, so I know who wants to speak, and also I'd like to kind of try to have some of the people who haven't been speaking speak to it as well. But particularly for this question, I'd like to direct it to the if there are religious, spiritual, or holistic leaders present, or if this has particularly had a religious perspective in what you've been doing. And I know, Anna, we had put you off to this religious question, so I will go back to you.
Okay, no, I just wanted to make a comment that when I was in Guatemala, I went to a mass. I'm not Catholic, but I went to mass. I like to see how people think and what is happening. And as soon as I got in, the priest was saying this huge church. It was more than 500 people there. He was saying, and you men, don't hit your woman that often. And you women, respect more your men in your lives. That says it all. And that was like 4 or 5 years ago.
Wow. Don't hit your woman that much, right?
Not that much. Just a little bit's okay.
Right.
Church was giving, well, at least that priest, right, was giving permission to continue doing that.
Yeah, so it really shows that a lot of education needs to be still done, even amongst people we would think it doesn't need to be done by.
Right.
Did some other people who haven't had a chance to speak, do you have anything to say about this religious aspect? Okay, Michael, is your hand up for this question?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I don't even have to click on it. I can just move it. Yes, though Denisha was reading some, lovely precepts and quotes from various religions on the equality. And what I'm going to say is not going to be popular right now, but I think one of the major roots of domestic violence, looking at a man and a woman, looking at that dynamic, is that the patriarchal nature of it, the superiority that superiority and entitlement that many men feel in putting women down. And I've noted since I was quite young, whatever religious faith I'm talking to or engaged in or studying, that the supreme deity, God, is He, our Father in heaven, and religions were interpreted by the various from the various prophets a couple of thousand years ago at least, and at that time, what was going on was that women were property of men, and I think this gets perpetuated by even some of us who are leaders in this field of domestic violence and fighting for women's causes, etc., that we refer to God, the supreme deity, as a man. And I'm very much against that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, that's a good point. We just kind of accept that. And of course, in English, there is this, well, I guess it's political correctness, though, to some degree, but, not calling stewardesses, not calling flight attendants stewardesses anymore, or postmen, what do we call them? Postal mail carriers.
Yeah, but way beyond that, I think children are growing up and being steeped in religion, learning that God is a man, and man rules over women.
Right.
Men rule over all of us, supposedly.
Right, I understand what you mean. Yes, and that has more of an effect than just mail carriers or stewardesses changing that language. Well, why don't we go to question number 8, Denisha?
Okay. Question number 8 is.
We can't hear you again. Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, I have unmuted myself.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Public health is a multi-dimensional concept that encompasses biological, social, psychological, individual, and community-centered collective dimensions of healthcare, which are all intercausally related to impact the quality of life. However, many public health practitioners, especially when dealing with domestic violence conflict, have the tendency to see the victim's health through a rigid categorization, creating deficiencies in the health infrastructure, which does not fully meet the dynamic health needs of our world population. Interprofessional education, leadership, and collaboration can diminish this deficiency by offering members of public health professionals the optimal opportunity to engage with other students, educators, communities, and the world in expanding individual-based concepts of domestic violence and health and provide more comprehensive team-based care. The interprofessional education, leadership, and collaboration are now the new emerging trends in combating public health problems, especially domestic violence, and can be analyzed with our No More Tears strategies. Instead of fostering competitive domestic violence education between different agencies, allowing agency leaders to cultivate an environmental, highly rich environmental, team-based, collaborative educational process through interprofessionalism in public health. One of the most significant solutions aimed to domestic violence problem is the enlightenment of individuals through collaboration involving creative endeavors in the artistic, media-related, entertainment avenues, writing, and other educational pathways. And I know we have a lot of, Dr. Anna probably has a lot of creative background in this. She may want to discuss and explore, but I know I wanted everyone to offer some insightful teaching avenues through this topic of interprofessional education in public health.
Yes, what I'd like to do is to call on some of the people who haven't really had a chance to say very much. Like Brandy, are you I'm just going down the list. Would you like to say, actually, Denisha, questions 8, 9, and 10 are kind of related in terms of trying to foster, which is, of course, one of the main goals of this webinar that you're hoping that we can all go beyond today and have more of a collaboration. So why don't, Brandy, would you, if we kind of expand this topic a little bit, Brandy, do you have anything to say about, some of the ways that we can collaborate, get people in various specialties to collaborate together, such as we have here? Brandy?
Sure. I think that drawing from some of the work that we've been doing in Florida, one example of collaborative work that we're doing is with child welfare agencies, for example, in which we have domestic violence advocates that are co-located within child welfare agencies, particularly child protection investigation units. And they're really helping to bridge the gap and to teach child welfare agencies and professionals how to work with survivors of domestic violence and their children, and how to approach them to really build a relationship with them and partner with them to keep their kids safe. And I think that there's many opportunities for us to collaborate in those ways, with law enforcement, with child welfare, with all of the different types of systems. And I think it's really really important that we continue to do that, and that we find innovative ways to collaborate with each other and to be able to make sure that systems are responding appropriately to survivors.
Yes, absolutely. That kind of includes Department of Child and Protective Services, because in some of the examples that I was giving, and I'm sure you all have had your own experiences where they miss cases where they should have swooped in and protected the children from witnessing domestic violence or becoming a victim themselves, as is often the case of domestic violence. And you would think that they'd have a higher ratio of success and not make as many mistakes. But as I've been talking about, they haven't intervened in cases where they should have taken the children. Well, they should have intervened in some way, not necessarily taken the children out of the home, but had supervised visitation or things like that, or in cases where they took the children out of the home and they shouldn't have, where they misinterpreted what people were doing, and actually there wasn't domestic violence in that home. Let me see about some other people who. Marcy Lopes, would you like to comment on this?
Oh, I was just sharing with Dr. Adachi that I feel like we have so many broken systems in Hawaii that I don't have solutions to offer, but one of the things that we really do need to focus on is economic justice for victims and eliminating barriers so we can help them get out of these violent relationships, and working on medical coverage for a lot of these holistic remedies.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Marquita, I don't know what that little warning sign. Marquita, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. Would you like to comment on this?
No, I was looking at my screen and I don't know what that is either. I've been watching it for the past like 45 minutes and I don't know why that's happening.
Okay. Smeet, we haven't heard from you yet. Smeet Patel, would you like to introduce yourself? Smeet, I don't know if you don't want to introduce yourself or you haven't figured out how to unmute yourself. Well, if you want to...
It's probably technical.
Yes, if you figure out how to unmute yourself down the line, just go for it and just say that you're here. Why don't we go on to question number 9, because as I said, 8, 9, and 10 are similar, so we can still, have comments to make on this. Denisha?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, the same, leading from interprofessional collaboration to e-networking, this facilitation session from No More Tears project has truly opened channels of effective communications, enhanced information discovery, has allowed everyone to have an opportunity to broaden their horizons in networking and connections. The online networking platform provides a target of wider audience, making it a very useful and effective tool, educational, collaborative, for recruitment-wise for domestic violence leaders. The online communities and the educational process improves organizational knowledge and expands awareness at a faster rate than any other platform. The online communities consist of groups and organizations and institutions, all of which contribute greatly to the process of resolution strategies as a whole. So if people want to talk more leading from interprofessional collaboration to e-networking solutions for domestic violence concepts and how agencies can work together.
I mean, obviously today's webinar is a prime example of bringing people together in this way. And does anyone have any thoughts for continuing and using social media, e-networking in particular, to continue this? Christy?
Yeah, hi. I think this is a great way to speak to each other, and the only issue really is that I'm really sad that out of 202 people, only 10 or 11 of us showed up today. Maybe a good idea would be to ask people what would be a better time. Sunday afternoon, not a good time.
Actually, I've had reverse complaints. Some of the leaders, they got sick, and they said that they had so much to say, and everybody was just wanting to contribute and to have a smaller, more focused group with a quality discussion rather than a larger group and just having, you know, one comment here and there from like 50 people. So maybe that's, you know, there are different pros and cons, I guess, for.
Lots of webinars. There's a lot of people, and then so many people are shy, so they don't talk, but they like to listen. And then maybe fewer questions, because it seems like there's so many topics that are being discussed. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint one thing. But overall, I think this is a great webinar, and the speakers are awesome. And there's so much talent here, and I'm trying to write down everybody's email address. So really, really helpful for me, because I've gotten into the domestic violence community because of my own personal experience, and again, I've not been able to speak my own community because of the criminal case that's pending against my husband.
Mm-hmm. Marquita, I don't think that you said very much. Would you like to contribute?
No, I was just in listen-only mode because honestly, I'm on the crisis line today, and I'm trying to do two things at one time. But yeah, I was listening a lot, and I thought that it was really interesting. I think that the only reason why this isn't maybe working as well because it is Sunday, but I like all the topics that were brought up, and I'm hoping that, you know, in the future maybe we can concentrate on something like religion. And have, like, you know, religion within the domestic violence realm, and also, you know, go maybe to not only religion but other cultures, just like concentrate on one culture at a time or something like that, because I really was interested in everything that everybody was talking about. There just wasn't enough time to fully develop everything.
Yes. Yes, I think this is like, we should be considering this as kind of an initial overview of some of the main issues. But yes, we could spend, you know, days just talking about any one of these questions and topics. Why don't we, does anyone else have anything to say about 9?
Yes, I do.
Who,
Hello?
is that? Yes?
Yes, Michael Levitan, yes. This is regarding 8 and 9, really. I think there's a lot of value here. I like, Carole, what you said. This is sort of an overview, an introduction, people starting to get to know each other online, if you will. But, you know, I belong to I'm on the board of a international conference on violence, abuse, and trauma. We have a conference in San Diego once a year, a 5-day conference. We get over 1,000 people from all over the world. And maybe we can do something like that, because as good as this is to connect in webinars and emails, there's nothing like face-to-face interaction where people can exchange ideas, build relationships, network in that sense, and that would help our interagency collaboration. Because at this conference, we get people who are specializing in child abuse, domestic violence, post-traumatic stress, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, etc., etc. First responders come. So those type of conferences, I think, can be really helpful. People, some of us getting to know each other in a more personal way.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree. All right, Christy, is your hand up because you want to say something about this?
Actually, one other thing I wanted to mention, that the conference that we're having in October, two of our target audiences are the Hawaii Police Department and the emergency room, because those are first responders or responders to the scene, and both of them, those areas are sorely deficient in Hawaii. The police officers disregard the victims, or they think the victim is the perpetrator, and in the emergency room they don't see the crime or the what's happened to the victim as being evidence of a violent crime, as in my case, even though the severity of my injuries were such that they couldn't be explained by what my perpetrator said, because I was in and out of consciousness. The whole story came from him. So our goal is to educate the emergency rooms and the Hawaii Police Department. Those are our two target areas right now.
Uh-huh.
I'd really like to make a comment, if you allow me, where we're in Los Angeles, Ana Nogales. We are part now of the DART program, which is the Domestic Abuse Response Team with the LAPD, Los Angeles Police Department. It's a great program, and so maybe you want to take it to Hawaii too, or whatever you want to. What it is that when there is a 911 call, the dispatcher goes, a police car goes with 2 officers, and there's a second car, which is a DART car. In the DART car, there is a police officer, and also one of our counselors. So once the situation is clear and we can go in, as soon as the police let us know that we can go in, then one of our counselors goes and talks to the victim. And this is really an excellent program, because then the victim knows at that point what the resources are. She gets some crisis intervention right there, or a shelter if she needs it, whatever she might need. And I think it's true, you know, not all police officers are totally trained in domestic violence, but a counselor that has been trained in domestic violence is. So this is a perfect collaboration of law and counseling, where we can work together and we can make a difference.
Yes, and you know, it's so important to get the victim right after the abuse, because when they have too much time to think about it, then they start, you know, thinking about reasons why they shouldn't claim that they were abused, you know, why they should hide it. And if you get them when they're right at that moment where they're upset and they're angry and they realize, you know, how bad this is, oftentimes they will follow through, whereas if you give them a week or so, you know, then they rationalize, and meanwhile their abuser gives them all kinds of excuses. Oh, I'll do much better, I'm so sorry. So that is a really good idea to get them at that moment. Denisha, why don't we go on to 10? Question 10.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Final question. Thank you, everyone. International perspectives on domestic violence. I always talk about philosophy and Gandhi's philosophy of being the change that you wish to see in the world. We've quoted it repeatedly through No More Tears. And the team of No More Tears desires to expand this vision of change in helping combat the conflict of domestic violence on a global scale. The change of hearts and the mindset of people to accept women's equality with men and men's equality with women continues to remain a long-term goal. One of the most powerful public health strategies has been public health educational campaigns that presents violence against women with health and other prevention strategies globally. Many international meetings have made it clear that the new and creative programs to work with abused women across many different countries and cultures that are evolving on a regular basis. Thus, it has become necessary to examine domestic violence from a cross-cultural, multinational perspective through the lens of public health educational campaigns on an international level. And I know Dr. Leviton has a lot to talk about this. He's actually developed a campaign that's global.
On a global level? Yes, it's Levitan.
Sorry,
Levitan. Yeah. Well, I mentioned earlier the Global Peace Committee. It's trying to, engage people internationally, but also to settle international conflicts. As I said earlier, to have a voice in that. But at the same time, I think that we sometimes, in our efforts to help victims and perpetrators, we overlook sometimes the effect on the greater community as well, and the extended family. And I think we need to look at that.
Yes. Christy? Christy, is your hand up? Would anyone else like to comment on this? Anna?
I just put my hand down. But anyway, the program of victims of a crime understands that, and when we work with victims of domestic violence, we do work with the families, because we can see the impact not just on the immediate family but also in the extended family. It affects everybody. It affects all of us. It affects the society.
Let me just ask Marquita. There's a funny little sign there, but do you have anything else that you would like to say?
No, that's fine.
Okay, is anyone? Well, why don't we? Okay, I think we're ready to sort of draw. Well, Denisha, of course, you're the main organizer. Before I sort of bring this to a close, we're gonna. I just want to have some closing comments, and then I'll give us all a guided image. Denisha, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think this was a phenomenal discussion. I really appreciate everyone's contributions. I am deeply inspired with everyone's background, and I think so perhaps considering more focus groups, more specific, topics. I just wanted to kind of get a feel of an initial launch of a webinar through No More Tears. So, yay, we did it. Thank you.
Yay!
I have a final comment, if I may.
Sure.
Michael Levitan, final comment. Yes. Denisha, earlier you mentioned the quote from Gandhi, "Be the change you want to be." And I was thinking that so much of what happens in interpersonal violence, domestic violence, is that the perpetrator feels, in their mind, they feel that they were put upon, they were neglected, they were mistreated, and in a certain, if you get to the specific interdynamics of it, it's as if they feel that they were wronged, and now they're taking revenge. Unless there's a psychosis present, these incidents don't come out of the blue. So it's very much revenge motivated. If you look at international conflicts, whether it's groups of terrorists or established countries that are at war, it's sort of revenge, getting back. And I thought of, I wanted to close with this final another beautiful quote from Gandhi regarding revenge. An eye for an eye will make the whole world blind.
Yes, yes. Okay, well, yes, everyone has really made such incredible contributions, and I do think this is a wonderful starting place, showing us that we, that we have something here that to continue, and a lot of passion. I just want to make a couple of closing remarks as far as like why this is more important today, before we go to the guided imagery, why this is more important today than ever before. And some of you have already kind of implied some of these things. People are angrier today than ever. They're more fearful, more desperate, Some of the reasons are because of the economy and the fear of terrorism, the threat of terrorism, the very real threat of terrorism. Women, you know, having increased obviously, other than in these domestic violence situations, but so women as a whole have increased in their power in society. Yes, of course, they're not being paid as much as men and all of that, but on the whole, there has been, certainly compared to decades ago, an increase in women's power, such as.
But Carol, there's been some backlash about that as well from men.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Just give me a break here. That's what
I'm just helping.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That because of women getting more power in society, there is a backlash. Men are feeling more emasculated, feeling more resentful, feeling more frustrated. Even if it's that they're being frustrated by their female boss, they then come home and take it out on their wife or their girlfriend. Also, there's more, this domestic violence is more crucial today, more of a problem today because of so much self-loathing, where men are feeling powerless and increased in their self-loathing, and they take that out on women as well. Social media, there's a major problem with social media. One of the things I do is I'm a consultant to a reality TV show about relationships, and the jealousy that goes on. You know, people look at each other's texts, and if somebody is communicating with someone of the opposite sex, they assume they're sleeping with them. Of course, in many cases it's true, but sometimes it isn't true. Then there are all kinds of games being played on Facebook, for example, people putting things up there that make the perpetrator furious. And so that's another reason why domestic violence is worse today. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the violent video games, violence in the media in general. I've been a long-time activist against that, and especially violent video games that perpetrates that, in fact, where you get points for being violent towards women. So all of these things are reasons why what we're doing is more important than ever. So now, Denisha, I would like to go into the guided image. If you could start playing the music. Can you make it a little louder?
Can you hear that, or
just maybe we can. Well, we'll just have to do it, I guess, without. Unless we can do it from here. Can we?
Yeah, Carol, you have a nice voice. Guide us.
All right, I won't sing, but I'll do a guided imagery without music. We can do that. Okay, so everyone needs to sit back in their chair, or if you're sitting on a couch, wherever you're sitting, relax. If you're lying on a bed, put your feet up on the bed or on the couch, and just relax. I know we've been talking about a lot of things that make us all feel angry or passionate, or like we want to go out and cure the whole world of these horrible things that are going on, and that's wonderful. But now, sit back and relax and start taking some deep breaths. You can start taking a deep breath in, close your eyes and take a deep breath in, and feel yourself relaxing. Feel the breath going up into your head, taking away all the cobwebs in your head, clearing them out, feeling every part of your body relaxing, from your head to your shoulders. Feel your shoulders relax, feel your arms relax, feel your chest relax, your abdomen, your hips, everything. Feel the sensation of relaxation going down through your body with each breath. In and out, in and out, in and out. And visualize yourself walking on a beach. You're seeing the waves of the sunny day, seeing the waves come slowly up to the beach and back again, in tune with your breath. As you're breathing, the waves are going in and out, just like your breaths, just like you're breathing. And as you relax, why don't you think back on all that we've been talking about today and see someone, either a person or a wizard or an animal, some kind of creature coming towards you to join you on the beach. Maybe a creature, an animal, a person who is symbolic of something that we've been talking about today. Because I want you to think of what did you hear that touched you the most? Was it talking about your own experience as a victim, or watching people engaged in domestic violence? Was it talking about some book that you've written, or something that someone else has written, or some story that you heard, feeling like you want to get involved in something that you heard about? Think about what it was that touched you the most, and then think about how you can incorporate that, how you can incorporate your reaction into where you go from here. How you can take that in, and how you've gotten a new idea, for example, or feel more passionate about an idea that you've had but hadn't thought about for a while, and where you're going to go with that. And as you walk down the beach with the tide going in and out, you'll walk towards a sand hill, something that the waves have made, a sand castle, a sand hill, something that the waves have created in the sand. And you'll see yourself walking towards that. You see what you're wearing, you see who your friend is, who this person or this creature, this animal, this maybe fairy tale creature, or a creature from some movie, or a parent, or someone you know in real life, or someone who's just symbolic of something that you've grasped in this webinar that we had. And you both walk towards this sand castle or sand hill, and you're going to start digging in that. And as you're digging, you feel the sand on your fingers. It may be near the surface of the beach, or you may have to dig deep down. But you continue the digging until you see some corner of what's buried in there. And when you find what's buried, you will see that, you'll interpret that as some kind of a token, some kind of a reminder of what it was that touched you today. And you'll take that with you as we close the seminar and you walk away from this beach. It'll be a reminder. Now, perhaps you'll be able to visualize it, or you'll write the name, you'll write a description of it, and put it on a Post-it on your computer or on your desk, so that you won't forget what it was that you were made to feel during this time that we've been together, and so that it can inspire you for the rest of the work that you do in domestic violence. So thank you all for being a part of this, and I hope that we will meet again, and that we can collaborate and work together, because obviously it needs all of our efforts to try to stop this from happening all around the world, in our own communities and around the world. And again, that's it. You can open your eyes if you haven't already. And thank you again for joining us.